What's the hardest thing about writing? Well, it's getting started. Maybe you're having a hard time coming up with a story idea, or you're stuck on where to take your story next. If you want a way into a story or a way through, I have 9 story starters to help you. This free PDF is full of story seeds and prompts to get you going. To download your 9 story starters, go to nancypanuccio.com/start. That's Nancy with an I, Panuccio with 2 C's, nancypanuccio.com/start. An antihero is a main character, the story's central character, who operates outside conventional parameters of good and evil. Their intentions and motives are often good, and they have redeemable qualities, but their actions are deeply flawed, often selfish, sometimes illegal, and sometimes even violent. Writer Unleashed is for you, a writer who has a story you want to bring onto the page and into the hearts and minds of readers. I'm Nancy Panuccio, writer, editor, and writing coach, and each week we'll explore techniques, mindsets, and inspiration for writing stories readers can't put down. Thanks for spending some time with me today. Now let's begin. Often writers will write their main character as someone with a fatal flaw. These are troublesome characters who are wrestling with a big life problem, but they get themselves into trouble and wreak havoc on those closest to them. They're anti-heroes, meaning they appear to lack moral fortitude, idealism, or even a sense of responsibility, and they wreak havoc on the people closest to them, even though their intentions may be good, maybe even honorable, but they cross a moral line to solve an urgent problem, and that's what makes them fascinating. I'm a big fan of anti-heroes because we can't have a neutral reaction to them. These are characters like Walter White from Breaking Bad, who descends into a life of crime to financially support his family after he's diagnosed with cancer. I'm also thinking of the series Your Honor, where a respected judge gets entangled into a web of lies and cover-ups after his young son flees a car accident where a mob boss's son dies. Now, an anti-hero is not your antagonist. It is your central character, your protagonist. When written effectively, anti-heroes force us to live in the gray area. They force us to challenge the status quo. So in this episode, I'll share 4 ways to create an anti-hero who's complex, fascinating, and unforgettable. First, what is an anti-hero? An anti-hero is the hero of your story, your protagonist, but he or she doesn't follow conventional patterns of heroism. They often do bad things for noble reasons, at least in their mind. What makes them irresistible to readers is our complicated reaction to them. We may deplore what they do and yet still root for them or worry about them. But what makes them compelling and magnetic and unforgettable is that we don't have a simple reaction to them. And so we're implicated in the bad or destructive things they do. I think of Tony Soprano or Walter White from Breaking Bad, Humbert Humbert from Lolita, Holden Caulfield from The Catcher in the Rye. He's an anti-hero because he's rebellious. He's a cynic. He has this disdain for societal norms. He has this vitriolic relationship to the adults in his life, and he has expectations that he doesn't want to conform to. He's not your typical protagonist. Jay Gatsby, he's the main protagonist, but it's told from a peripheral character's perspective. But Gatsby is always bending the law. He's obsessive in his pursuit for wealth and lost love. And all of this is destructive. So he's an anti-hero. Macbeth is an anti-hero. He's tragic. He has this unquenchable ambition which drives him to murder and ultimately madness. I'm also thinking of Tom Ripley from the Netflix series Ripley. Now, I had a more stock reaction to the movie version played by Matt Damon, but Andrew Scott had me not liking him. He was clearly a sociopath, but I still cared for him in certain parts of the film, meaning I worried for him at various points. I wanted him to get caught, but I was also thoroughly on the edge of my seat whenever I thought he was in trouble. I was absorbed in his outcome, even though I abhorred everything he did. So what's great about anti-heroes is that you can have conflicting feelings about them that all operate simultaneously. So there are conflicting feelings that occupy the same space, and all of them are true. What these characters do may be despicable, unlikable, unsympathetic, beyond our ken, but we can still care, and we can't look away. Now, what do I mean by we care about them? It doesn't mean that we like them. I did not like Tony Soprano, but I was still rooting for him by the series finale, and nobody was more surprised by that than me. I deplored many of the things Walter White did to his partner in crime, Jesse, how he lied to his family, how he watched Jane choke on her own vomit and did nothing. But he had me hooked from the opening image of the show to its very end, even as his actions escalated in depravity and moral decline. I couldn't help but applaud him every time he outsmarted his competing drug lords, and I could sense the moral ambivalence he was wrestling with. So we're not talking about the stock sociopath, the stock addict, the stock drug lord or criminal who does bad things. We're talking about complicated human beings who do things we may abhor and reject, even fantasize about or envy, but we would never do. But anti-heroes are not the antagonist. He or she is the protagonist, the hero of the story. However, sometimes they do cross over into villain territory. Not always, but sometimes. Walter White starts off cooking meth to sell to local drug dealers. Not a moral thing to do, not to mention illegal, but it's not exactly villainous because his reasons for doing so are noble. He's just learned he has cancer, and he wants to ensure his wife and son's financial security when he dies. And what's raising the stakes is his wife is pregnant with their daughter. Their son has cerebral palsy. So we're willing to accept what he's doing. It's out of desperation, but he progressively morphs into villain territory. He's still fascinating and complex, but his good motives are mixed with more self-serving motives. As the series progresses, he becomes a villain to the very family he set out to protect. This is what makes him a fascinating anti-hero. We can't look away. So here are 4 ways to make anti-heroes fascinating and compelling. Number 1, make us care. When we meet Walter White, he's a high school chemistry teacher with a side job at a car wash. He learns he has lung cancer, and now he's faced with a dilemma. We don't have to like a character, but we do have to become absorbed in his or her dilemma. We like Walter White in our introduction to him. He's out of depth with all these ruthless drug dealers, but the more he faces his fears, the more brazen and empowered he becomes, and we start to root for him. We love to see him outsmart the bad guys, and we understand why he keeps his underground life hidden from his family. We don't like Tom Ripley when we first meet him. He's hard to read. He's a grifter. He's down on his luck when we first meet him. He's living in a dilapidated one-room apartment with a leaking ceiling. But there are other ways we can identify with him. When he first arrives in Italy, he's out of place. He has to buy a bathing suit because the man he's there to court to go back home is on the beach. He walks on the beach wearing a Speedo bathing suit, and we know that he feels very misplaced, very uncomfortable. So with any character, but especially anti-heroes, we need to see some part of ourselves in the character. We talked about this in episode 203, about finding truth in your story, about integrating yourself with your character or parts of yourself. You want to have empathy between you and your character. So there's something inside of you that's like your character. You're not your character. You've never been, let's say, a drug lord or an addict, but you can understand your character's concerns. You can identify with their problem. So, number one, make us care. Doesn't mean that we like your character, and we certainly don't have to like what he or she does, but we do need to understand their dilemma. We can identify some aspect of our humanity with theirs. Okay, on to number 2. Build belief in your character's motives. All great characters are rooted in a problem that obsesses them for the whole story and drives their immoral actions. So you have to have a problem before you have a motive. Their intentions are not necessarily malicious. Their motives are good. Walter White's motive is to provide for his family because he has cancer. And while this motive stays constant, another motive emerges as the series progresses. Yes, he wants to leave his wife and son and infant daughter enough money to survive for the rest of their lives after he's dead. But a more sinister motive emerges as the series continues. He actually likes being a drug lord because he learns he's good at it. So by the end, he admits he continued to do this for himself. That is the character arc of change. Ripley's motive is not to get caught. He's been a grifter all his life, a con artist, but things turn when he kills Dickie Greenleaf. He's never killed anyone before, at least that's what we're led to believe. And so this puts him in a bind. So in his quest to suppress the truth, it leads to another murder. I talk about this more in episode 190, How to Create Page-Turning Tension. I'll link in the show notes. Okay, number 3, moral ambivalence. All great anti-heroes wrestle with moral ambivalence. If your character has drug addiction, for example, and does everything in his power to feed the addiction, lie, steal, wreck his relationships, but would also love to be and stay sober, well, that's moral ambivalence. They don't really want to hurt other people. They don't really want to self-destruct, but the addiction is overpowering. Moral ambivalence. Walter White starts out with a noble goal, earn enough money to leave his family if and when he dies of cancer. So he's just been diagnosed with lung cancer. And his high school teaching job barely pays the bills. And so he enlists a past student, Jesse, to help him cook and sell meth. He's the cook, Jesse's the salesman. And as the series continues, he puts Jesse in a lot of danger. Jesse's life is ruined by the end of the series. He's a shell of the person he was earlier. And when he stands over the bed and watches Jesse's girlfriend choke on her own vomit, he stands there and does nothing, but you see the pain, the moral ambivalence, because he's a father. But he lets her die to preserve his safety, to preserve his family's well-being. Okay, on to number 4. Supporting characters. Supporting characters amplify your antihero. So other characters amplify your antihero's good qualities and bad qualities. For example, Tony Soprano has a therapist. This is where he opens up to his anxieties. It shows his more vulnerable side, the one he hides from the rest of the world. Walter White has Jesse, which shows his soft spot and his manipulative tendencies, which have tragic circumstances for Jesse. In the final episode, Walter White does save him and sets him free to a new future. So he makes good on all the harm he did to him. So it vindicates Walter. Okay, let's wrap this up. An antihero is a main character, the story's central character, who operates outside conventional parameters of good and evil. Their intentions and motives are often good, and they have redeemable qualities, but their actions are deeply flawed, often selfish, sometimes illegal, and sometimes even violent. To create a fascinating, complex, and unforgettable antihero, number 1, make us care. Number 2, give them a moral dilemma. Number 3, build beliefs in their motives. And number 4, use supporting characters to amplify them. So there you have it. Thanks for hanging out with me today. And if you know any writers who need some support in their writing, please share this episode or the Writer Unleashed podcast in general. And if you love what you're listening to, subscribe on your favorite listening platform and please leave me a review. Reading how this podcast impacts your writing truly lights me up and helps me create topics for the show. Till next time, keep writing, and I'll talk to you soon.